Ever since I first started making Adventure Time related videos, one character that's constantly been popping up in the comments from you guys is Fern. Fern is a character I really like, but I didn't want to go all in at the start because I feel like that would be a long process to undergo. So I wanted to talk about one episode in specific, and personally what I consider to be one of, if not Fern's, peak episode, and that is the episode Do No Harm. I would say it's his peak episode because this is the episode where Fern becomes Fern. And the reason I think this episode is so great is because of his journey of self-actualization, while also having that sort of parallel journey with Finn, and also the fact that this episode foreshadows like the entirety of the rest of their arc together, which I think is just really awesome. Fern first appears in the episode Two Swords, and I'm not going to really get into that because that's sort of a wake-up call for Fern. Literally, we see him actually learn how to speak and learn how to smell and learn how to hear, and it's that basic human instinct that makes the episode Do No Harm especially compelling, because we've already got the basics out of the way. Now it's about how the world is going to interact with Fern instead of Fern interacting with the world. Fern, at his basic instincts, is trying to be Finn, but the entire world around Fern is telling Fern they are not Finn. It makes it really compelling to see how Fern interacts with things differently, and how Finn interacts with things differently after interacting with Fern. Who is Finn in comparison to Fern and vice versa is a huge question throughout this episode and the rest of the show as a whole. I mean, simple as that. And every time they have an episode together, it shows not just the growth that Finn has had since the start of the series, but the downfall Fern has had. In the later seasons of Adventure Time, writers would either bring characters back to the forefront very strongly, or introduce new characters that completely changed the game the second they showed up. And when Fern first appeared, he obviously immediately stole the show. He had a fun, weird design, his voice was very endearing because of his awkward nature, and the fact he was a villainous figure in the story that was a big gray area character really hooked a lot of people in, and got them very invested in who Fern was, and whether Fern would be a good guy or bad guy. But obviously in the world of Adventure Time, the ideas of a good and a bad guy doesn't really exist at this point in the show. But now let's get into the actual contents of the episode, because I think a lot of the stuff that's presented in this really adds to Fern's character and the possibility of what Finn could be in the future. And before we, fully get into it, I just want to say, oh my god, the foreshadowing of Finn being a doctor before the Island series was so just chef's kiss. This was absolutely fantastic on the rewatch, and I feel like this gets better and better, and him helping people in a different way than using violence, while Fern uses violence solely, I thought was really cool. It's a sort of psychological ego versus the id, which is actually kind of funny because I feel as though a lot of people more so focus on Fern having these neurotic tendencies that focus on his super ego versus his id, but in this episode it's clearly focused on him having these violent outbursts where he destroys entire dungeons just to have some sense of validation, but at the end of the day he still feels unsatisfied because he finds out that his life actually has no purpose whatsoever. Fern not having that sense of purpose in his life destroys him pretty much and causes him to try and create an identity of his own through the use of a new name, Fern. And I find this scene really powerful because it goes to show that Fern is actively trying to be someone different, but obviously as the series continues he sort of stumbles into this idea of being worse than Finn and wanting to be the better Finn. But I think that this sort of upward hill into the steep downfall after is really cool and has a lot of promise to show that Fern can be something great if he just believed in himself. Something that I think is so amazing about this episode on rewatch is just seeing how utterly broken Fern is, both in the mental way where Fern is constantly struggling trying to find some sort of semblance of who he used to be, and how literally broken he is. But this sense of him being so much greater than Finn actually is seen as a negative in his mind. He could just destroy this grass wizard who made him instantly. He could get all the closure he needs, but he knows that that's not what Finn would do. And that makes him have that sense of insecurity grow even more. Who is he if he is not Finn? Since Finn and Fern at their core are personality-wise the exact same person, I think a great way of comparing them is to show where they land on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. For those who don't know, this is a sort of scale of how satisfied one person is in one's life. Now Finn as we could all assume, being the hero of OO and having tons of friends and a house and food and being rich, is pretty much at the self-actualization stage, able to do whatever he wants. Meanwhile, Fern isn't even able to achieve the minimum level of this, where he's not even able to eat food, the most basic thing on the hierarchy of needs, showing that everything is immediately off for Fern. And when he tries to find any other sense of stability in any other sections of the hierarchy of needs, it leads to nothing, and that eventually is what leads Fern to leaving and trying to forge his own path. I think a very similar character in this regard is Betty, who could have had bonds with other characters, yet chooses not to because of the focus on finding some specific sense of purpose. One of my favorite aspects of this episode is the ending, where we see that Finn fails horribly. He literally injures multiple people, but because of who he is, he's viewed as trying his best and not seen negatively really at all. He tried to help someone, and at the end of the day, it turns out what he was going to do to Susan actually would have woken her up. But Fern, who actually succeeded in a masterclass way, able to do everything he wanted to do just effortlessly because of his innate new grass demon abilities, is seen as a failure because he didn't do it the right way. He didn't do it the way Finn would, and this causes him to feel worse about himself than Finn, who feels bad already about him doing something wrong. Fern's mental state is so low to the point where his successes aren't successes because he's not doing them the way Finn would. That triggers this sense of needing to search for one's identity, which is so key to Fern as a character. As ironic as it might seem, since Fern literally rides off into the sunset like a daring adventurer, the dichotomy between him and Finn is the dichotomy of a leader and a follower. Finn obviously is a leader. He's willing to do anything he can to help people or just do something new because he's bored. He's an incredibly free-spirited character, while Fern, who in actuality is Finn, is being forced into a role he's never been accustomed to, in a body he's not used to either. He's trying to find some sense of purpose, not as Finn, but as Fern. And obviously, he's not going to be able to do this, and he'll spiral further out of control until he tries to be the only Finn and the real Finn. But I find this moment of him trying to find his path really powerful, because it shows he is genuinely trying. But at the end of the day, he's going to succumb to the will of the grass demon inside of him and become something completely dissimilar from the original Finn that he once was. He has lost all his sense of adventure, hope, and thrill, and is willing to follow rather than lead. Even though Finn and Fern are literally the exact same person, the same memories and the same experiences, it's the people around them that make them who they are. And who's to say if Finn didn't have that connection, he would have ended up like Fern? Because Finn wouldn't have had Fern in the first place had he not had these forms of connections. I know I said I was mainly going to discuss Do No Harm, but you know, Fern is such a rich character that I kind of jumbled around a lot there. But hey, I did talk about him going absolutely insane in this episode, which obviously, you know, would have been awesome, but we'll get to that eventually. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that video, and this video is special for two reasons. One, it's the first video of 2024. There's going to be a lot of bangers to come, so if you enjoyed, please consider subscribing. And secondly, this is the first video I've done without using Premiere Pro. Yes, I'm finally free from the shackles of Adobe. I'm currently using DaVinci Resolve, which is a program my friend recommended to me. So hopefully you can tell that this video is a bit different. And if there's some things you guys think I could improve on with this, please let me know. I'm very new to this program. If any of you guys use DaVinci Resolve, just let me know. And let me know anything you guys want me to talk about down below. That'll be it for me. Take care and have a good one.